The silence at dinner. Nobody screamed during dinner in our house. That was the strange part. People think toxic families are loud, violent, chaotic. But ours was built on silence, the kind that crawled across the table and wrapped around your throat until speaking felt dangerous. My father sat at the head of the table every night like a king nobody voted for. My mother moved carefully around him, always smiling too fast, always apologizing before anyone even got angry. And me? I learned early that the safest thing a boy could become was invisible. I was 9 years old the first time I realized something was wrong with our family. My little sister dropped a glass of milk. That was it, just milk. But the moment the glass shattered, the entire room froze like someone had pulled a gun. Dad slowly placed his fork down. Mom immediately started apologizing. It was my fault. She didn't mean it. I should have used the plastic cups. My sister was shaking so badly she couldn't breathe. And my father. He never raised his voice. That's what made him terrifying. He simply stared at her while the kitchen clock ticked louder and louder. Then he said, "You ruin every peaceful moment in this house." I remember staring at my mashed potatoes while my sister cried silently beside me. Nobody defended her, not even me, especially not me. Because in our house, survival meant learning whose pain mattered and whose didn't. Years later, people would tell me, "Your dad seemed like such a calm guy." They had no idea calm could feel like a loaded weapon. The older I got, the more I understood the rules. Rule number 1, never embarrass dad. Rule number 2, mom will always protect him. Rule number 3, if something terrible happens, we pretend it didn't. That last rule became the foundation of our family, and eventually, it destroyed all of us. The favorite child. By 13, I already understood my role in the family. I was the disappointment. My younger brother Daniel was the golden child. Everything he did became a family celebration, straight A's, football trophies. Even the way he laughed seemed to make my parents proud. Me, I became the emotional garbage can everyone dumped into. Dad criticized everything about me. Too sensitive, too quiet, too weak, too dramatic. If I got angry, I was unstable. If I stayed silent, I was disrespectful. There was no version of me that was allowed to exist peacefully in that house. One winter night, Dad accused me of stealing money from his wallet. I didn't take it. I knew Daniel did. I had literally watched him shove the cash into his backpack earlier that afternoon. But when Dad asked who took it, Daniel just looked at me and stayed silent. That was enough. Dad dragged me into the garage during a snowstorm and locked the door behind us. I can still smell the gasoline, still hear the metal toolbox slamming shut. "You think I'm stupid?" he asked. I kept saying I didn't do it. Wrong answer. Because the truth never mattered in our family. Only loyalty did. And loyalty meant protecting the family image at all costs, even if someone innocent got destroyed in the process, especially if it was me. Later that night, Mom came into my room while I held ice against my swollen face. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just whispered, "You know how your father gets." That sentence haunted me for decades, because that was the moment I realized something worse than abuse: permission. She knew, she always knew, and she chose him every single time. What happened to Emily? My sister Emily stopped talking when she was 15, not completely, just around Dad. Around him she became hollow, like someone had unplugged her soul. Mom claimed it was teenage hormones. Dad called her dramatic. Daniel ignored it. And me? I knew something was wrong. One night, Emily knocked on my bedroom door around 2 a.m. She looked terrified. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. "I need you to promise me something," she whispered. I asked what happened. She looked toward the hallway before answering. "Don't leave me alone with him anymore." I felt my stomach drop. She never explained further, and I was too scared to ask. That's the part guilt eats alive years later, the moments where you almost uncover the truth, but fear convinces you not to. A week later, Emily tried to overdose in the bathroom. Dad told the hospital she was attention-seeking. Mom cried harder about the embarrassment than the attempt itself. Nobody asked why Emily was suffering. In our family, emotions were treated like crimes. After that, she changed completely. She stopped laughing, stopped singing, stopped making eye contact. And every time Dad entered a room, she physically flinched. I noticed. I noticed everything, but I never said a word. Because children raised inside toxic homes learn one terrifying lesson: silence keeps you alive. The funeral. I hadn't been back to that house in 19 years. Not for Christmas, not for birthdays, not even after Emily disappeared from the family completely, especially not after her. But when my mother died from a stroke in late October, Daniel called me for the first time in almost 6 years. "You should come home," he said. Home. Funny how one word can still feel like a threat. The funeral took place on a gray Thursday morning under freezing rain, the kind that soaked through your clothes slowly enough that you didn't realize you were shivering until it was too late. Dad stood beside the coffin greeting people like a politician after a campaign speech, calm, controlled, respected. Everyone kept saying the same thing: "Your mother was such a beautiful soul." I almost laughed. Beautiful souls don't watch their children drown in silence, but grief does strange things to memory. It softens sharp edges, turns survivors into saints. I stood near the back of the church, avoiding eye contact while old neighbors approached me one by one. "Your father's holding up so well. Your family has always been so strong. Your mom loved keeping everyone together." Together. That word nearly made me sick, because the truth was our family stayed together the same way prisoners stay inside burning buildings: fear. After the service, Dad invited everyone back to the house. Nobody said no. They never did. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The white paint was peeling. The porch sagged slightly to one side. Dead leaves crowded the gutters. But the moment I stepped inside, I was 17 again. My chest tightened instantly. Trauma is weird like that. Your body remembers before your mind does. The smell of stale coffee, the ticking grandfather clock, the floorboard near the stairs that always creaked. I hadn't heard that sound in almost 2 decades, yet my nervous system recognized it immediately. Danger. Daniel walked around greeting relatives while Dad sat silently in his recliner watching football like nothing had happened. Like Mom hadn't been buried 3 hours earlier. That was his gift. Emotional absence disguised as strength. Late that evening, after everyone finally left, I found myself alone in the kitchen staring at the sink. The exact same sink where my sister spilled milk 28 years earlier. I could still hear the glass shattering, still hear Dad's voice. "You ruin every peaceful moment in this house. You still blaming me for everything?" I turned around. Dad stood in the doorway holding a whiskey glass. Older now, smaller somehow, but still terrifying. "I'm not blaming you for everything," I said carefully. "Just most of it." His jaw tightened. For a second, I saw the old version of him underneath the wrinkles, the monster. "You were always too sensitive, Ethan." There it was, that sentence, the anthem of abusive parents everywhere. Not, "I hurt you," not, "I failed you," just, "You reacted incorrectly to pain." I stared at him for a long moment before asking the question I'd buried for years. What happened to Emily? The room went silent. Even the football game seemed quieter. Dad took a slow sip of whiskey. "She was sick." "No," I said. "She was scared." Something dark flickered across his face then. Not guilt. Anger. "How dare you come into my house?" "My house?" I snapped. "You made this place feel like a graveyard." He stood up so fast the recliner slammed backward, and suddenly I was 16 again, heart pounding, body frozen. That's the cruel thing about childhood trauma. Even grown men become children around the people who broke them. Dad stepped closer. For one horrible second, I thought he might hit me. Instead, he leaned forward and whispered, "You have no idea what your mother was hiding from you." Then he walked upstairs. leaving me alone in the dark kitchen with a sentence that would destroy everything I thought I knew. The basement tapes. I didn't sleep after my conversation with Dad. Every sound inside that house felt wrong. The pipes groaning, the floorboards shifting, the old clock downstairs ticking like a countdown. Around 2:30 in the morning, I finally gave up trying to rest. Something kept pulling at me, not curiosity, memory. There are places in toxic homes that children learn to fear without understanding why. For us, it was the basement. Dad hated anyone going down there. If we got too close to the door, his entire mood changed instantly. Back then, I thought maybe he just wanted privacy. As an adult, I realized something darker: control. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen and slowly opened the basement door. The smell hit first: dust, old wood, moisture trapped for decades. The stairs creaked beneath my weight exactly the way they did when I was a kid, and suddenly memories started flooding back. Emily standing at the top of the stairs, refusing to go down. Mom nervously changing the subject whenever Dad disappeared for hours. Daniel pretending not to notice anything. Families like ours survive through performance. Everyone learns their role. Everyone learns the script. The flashlight swept across old shelves covered in boxes. Most were filled with junk: Christmas decorations, broken tools, old tax records. Then I noticed a locked cabinet against the far wall. Of course it was locked. My chest tightened immediately. I should have walked away. But survivors spend their entire lives chasing answers they were never allowed to ask for. So I forced it open. Inside were dozens of VHS tapes. Most had normal labels: Christmas 1997, Daniel football, family vacation. But one tape simply said, Emily, private. The handwriting belonged to my father. That alone made my stomach turn. I carried the tape upstairs and found the old VCR beneath the television in the living room. The tape crackled as it started. At first it looked harmless: Emily sitting in the basement, Dad asking questions, the kind of conversation that almost seemed normal. But then I noticed her body language: the shaking hands, the inability to make eye contact, the way she flinched every time Dad's voice changed slightly. It wasn't a conversation. It was fear. Dad kept telling her things like, "You always create problems. You make this family harder to love. Why can't you just act normal?" Over and over again. The kind of emotional manipulation that slowly convinces someone they're the problem simply for hurting. And Emily, she kept apologizing. That was the hardest part to watch. Not anger, not rebellion. Apologies. The tape continued for nearly 30 minutes. At one point, Emily quietly said, "I just want to leave." Dad answered immediately, "You wouldn't survive without this family." That sentence hit me like a punch to the chest, because he used the exact same line on all of us: fear disguised as protection, control disguised as love. Near the end of the recording, the camera shifted suddenly and the tape distorted with static. Then Emily whispered something too quiet for me to fully hear. But whatever she said, Dad's tone changed instantly: cold, sharp, dangerous. The recording ended abruptly after that. I sat frozen in the dark living room long after the screen turned black. My entire childhood suddenly looked different. The silence, the fear, the emotional collapse happening inside our house for years. None of it had been accidental. Dad controlled people by making them doubt themselves. And Mom spent years helping everyone pretend it was normal. That realization hurt more than I expected. Because part of healing is accepting that some people didn't fail to see the damage. They simply chose comfort over confronting it. Upstairs, I heard the floor creak. Dad was awake. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of him anymore. The house that never said sorry. I confronted my father the next morning. No screaming, no dramatic speech, just exhaustion. The kind that settles into your bones after carrying pain for 30 years. He sat on the back porch drinking coffee when I walked outside, holding the VHS tape. The moment he saw it, his expression changed. Not shame, calculation. Abusive people don't fear morality, they fear exposure. You went through my things, he said coldly. You abused Emily. Silence. Wind moved through the dead trees behind the yard. Dad stared into his coffee cup for a long time before speaking. She was unstable. There it was again. The rewriting of reality, the family specialty. She was a child. She lied. You broke her. His voice hardened instantly. You think you know everything? Your mother spent years cleaning up after that girl's problems. That sentence hit me harder than anything else, not because it shocked me, because part of me had always known. Mom didn't protect us. She protected the illusion, the perfect family, the respected husband, the peaceful home. Meanwhile, Emily was drowning right in front of all of us. Where is she now? I asked quietly. Dad didn't answer, and suddenly, I understood. A horrible possibility opened inside my mind. You don't know, do you? Nothing. My father genuinely had no idea where his own daughter was. She disappeared 12 years earlier and he never even looked for her. Because toxic parents don't love their children, they love ownership, and once control disappears, so does interest. I stood there staring at him while decades of fear slowly dissolved into something else. Clarity. For the first time in my life, he looked small, just an old man sitting alone in a collapsing house filled with ghosts. Not a god, not a monster, just a coward. That night, I drove 3 hours to a storage facility Mom secretly rented years before her death. Inside was a single cardboard box, and on top, a letter addressed to me. Ethan, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. There are things I should have protected you from, things I should have stopped. I told myself staying silent kept this family alive, but silence is what destroyed us. Emily changed her name years ago. She asked me never to tell your father where she went. I think she was right to leave. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to leave too. Love, Mom. Inside the box was an address in Oregon. Emily, alive. I cried harder that night than I ever had at any funeral. Not because Mom apologized, because it came 20 years too late. A month later, I stood outside Emily's small house near Portland. I almost turned around 3 times. Then the front door opened. She looked older, tired, careful, but alive. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she walked forward slowly and hugged me, and something inside me finally broke open. Not pain this time, relief. The kind survivors feel when someone finally says, yes, it really happened, and you weren't crazy. 6 months later, the old family house burned down from an electrical fire. People called it tragic. But when I saw the flames on the news, I felt something I hadn't felt since childhood. Warmth. Because some houses aren't homes. Some are crime scenes with welcome mats. And sometimes, the healthiest thing a survivor can do is let the fire keep burning.